Podcasting from the beautiful state of Maine, welcome to another episode of the Learning from Leaders podcast, the show that focuses on identifying and developing the skills and behaviors that will inspire, empower, and compel others to follow your lead. Listen as Patrick's guests talk about the powerful leadership approaches they have identified and developed, which are vital for leading in today's challenging times. These are the same approaches that will positively impact you as a leader too. Learning from Leaders provides the right balance of leadership research with real-world scenarios, making it easy for you to rise above your best. All right, let's start the show.
Welcome everybody, I'm Patrick Verno and you're joining me for another episode of Learning from Leaders. In this episode, I thought I'd piggyback off of the last episode that was talking about really what makes the most effective teams. And we talked about three things. We talked about teams that provide support for each other, teams that challenge each other, and teams that celebrate each other. Those are really what makes a winning team. And again, I don't care if it's in a work setting or in a personal setting, that when we're able to do all three of those things, we really find that we have the best relationships. And what I thought I'd do, I know in the last episode, I went through and gave illustrations of certain behaviors based on a cables model that I use quite regularly on how these behaviors, these 6 behaviors, really addressed all 3 of those ingredients that were found in the best teams. And what I thought I'd do from there is to give you 2 questions that you can ask yourself based on each of those behaviors. And we're going to call it the daily dozen. So 12 questions that you can ask yourself that I think will help to recognize where you are in regards to these behaviors. And I think especially we can look at this if we're in a situation where maybe we're having a challenge with somebody or issues or a problem with somebody that we're working with or somebody that we live with. We can take a look and ask ourselves these questions based on these 6 behaviors. How am I doing? To me, it's almost like a troubleshooting guide that I can really evaluate. Well, if I'm honest with myself, where am I on this? Because the quicker that I can come from a standpoint of trying to identify what role do I play in this disengagement or dysfunction, the faster it will be for me to find a solution that's going to work to get us out of this, to get us on, to repair this, so to speak, in terms of where we need to be. So I'm going to start off with the first one in terms of congruence. And the 2 questions that you can ask yourself, one is, do my actions match my words? All right, so we're talking about really integrity here. Is what I say and what I do, is it the same thing? The next question on that is, am I consistently modeling what I expect from others? So it plays into that first one, right? But it really is, what am I doing? If I'm telling people that I want respect, but I don't demonstrate respect for anybody else, or I want you to listen to what I have to say, but I don't listen to you, you're going to basically tune me out because you're like, wait a minute, you want these things, but you're not doing them yourself. So when we move on to appreciation, there are 2 parts to this. One question that we ask ourselves is, am I consistently recognizing the positive contributions of others, right? Those people around me. And I talk about it in the workshops that I do as RPMs, recognizing positive moments. How often do I do that? We all like recognition on some level. Some need it more than others, but it's always nice to just feel as though you're appreciated for what you're doing. The other part of appreciation deals with biases. And the question is, am I open to understanding and appreciating the diversity of others? And boy, do we need that today in terms of appreciating other people's perspectives. I think too often right now we're in situations where if you don't agree with me, you're stupid or you're a redneck or you're illiterate or deplorable or whatever you're labeled, elitist, that we're not really appreciating that there can be different perspectives on things. So now we move on to belongingness. And the first question is am I positively contributing to the well-being of those around me? We know the importance of belongingness, and so many research studies that have been done in terms of looking at, really, we can almost think of this as though we're pack animals. We need each other. When we create well-being around us, we create a better environment. So along those lines, the next question is have my behaviors supported a culture of inclusion? Again, we hear so much about diversity, equity, and inclusion right now. These behaviors, these 6 cables, address all of the concerns or desires for having diversity, equity, and inclusion within an organization. People need to feel as though they belong, that they're part of it. And especially as a leader, how have I done? How am I about having other people feel as though they're welcomed or they're part of what's going on? So next we move on to listening. Have I been practicing 4-way listening? And we've talked about that before. I've got other episodes that I speak to this more in depth, but with our eyes, with our ears, with our mind, and with our heart. And when we listen with all 4 of those approaches, we really are listening to understand at that point, as opposed to listening to either respond or listening to undermine. The second question in there is, am I listening to understand or to undermine? And again, I think too often right now, we're only listening so that we can then make our counter argument or to insult the other person or demonstrate to them that they don't know what they're talking about. And when we're doing that, we're not really listening to where they're coming from. There's a lack of appreciation. The next is empathy, right? Have I made an effort to see things from another's point of view? Really imagining, what's it like? What if I were in their shoes? Would I be frustrated too? What would be going on in my own mind if I was where they are? And then the second part of this empathy piece is my demonstration of empathy sincere? And the reason I put that in there is because I think too often right now, maybe the buzzword is, oh, you've got to be empathetic, or especially in a workplace setting, we hear a lot around empathy and leadership, but people can tell when it's sincere or not sincere. So we need to ask ourselves, is my demonstration of empathy sincere? The next question is around specifics, right? That clear expectations. And to that point, have I set clear expectations that are understood and agreed by all involved? And there's very specific wording there, right? In terms of the question, are they understood and are they agreed by all involved? Because they might be understood, but do we agree with them? Or we might think we agree, but they're really not understood. And that oftentimes creates the window for conflict to come in. And in organizations, I certainly see this where there has been conflict or disagreement, and it oftentimes comes back to the fact that there haven't been clear expectations. And we can see this in relationships too, personally. What do we need from each other? How is this relationship going to thrive? What do I need from you, and what do you need from me? So the next question on that is, have my behaviors created a culture of ownership for what's expected? We can have the expectation be clear, but are we holding each other accountable to that? Is there ownership to what we both said we're going to do? And if there isn't, then we're right back to the beginning of this. We lack congruence. Our actions don't match our words. Those are the daily dozen that really, if you were to go down that list, if you're having a challenge with an individual, you can ask yourself those questions. Where is it? Is it congruence? Is it belongingness? Is it empathy that the challenge is coming from? It's in one of those areas, if not more than one. And the faster you are being open to looking in the mirror and deciding which of these do I own, the faster you're going to be to repairing whatever that relationship is, or whatever the damage is that's been created in that relationship. I hope you found this valuable. This is a tool that I use, or a model that I use regularly with clients. I will say that based on the research that I've done, on the testimonials that I've received, on what I've witnessed and observed myself, this works. And it works consistently when it's modeled consistently. Which of these do you think might be beneficial for you to work on in that relationship that you're trying to improve? Which one of those daily dozen do you need to address? I hope you found this valuable and helpful. As this podcast is themed, that leaders are learners. We're all here to learn and to get better and to improve. And on that note, I hope you're able to go out and rise above your best. Peace.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Learning from Leaders podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, please feel free to rate, review, and subscribe on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate that effort. Until next time, keep rising above your best as a leader.